I remember that they were having peace talks. The thing that really got it, I don't know if it was 50 or 51, was the big thing was the shape of the table, the size of the table, that went on for months and months and months before they ever got down, you know, to talking about peace. And of course, peace was not something that really ever came on out.
My father was in World War II. He was in Europe. I never met my dad till I was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years old, whatever it was, when he returned from Europe. So all we knew was there had been a war, and all we knew was our parents were home. You know, that was wonderful. But I can remember, you're helping me give them the year 1951, but even as an 8 or 10-year-old, I can remember seeing the headlines in the paper that North Korea invades South Korea, and then something to the effect, a day or so later, the U.S. at war again, or something to that effect. So even in a youngster's mind, it was a very, very vivid impression that it left with me. And of course, as a youngster, you know, you can't ever think, well, is my dad going to be leaving again?
It looked like the North Koreans were going to drive the Americans out of South Korea. And they were in a small peninsula called Busan, which is right on the southeast area. And when MacArthur came in, he was the commanding general of all the troops in the Far East. He was a 5-star general. There weren't too many 5-star generals at that time.
Oh, you know, what the heck is that? Where is it?
Korea is a small country, thousands of miles away. But what is happening there is important to every American. On Sunday, June 25th, Communist forces attacked the Republic of Korea. Free nations must be on their guard, more than ever before, against this kind of sneak attack.
They thought that if the North Koreans drove the Americans out of Korea, it would have started World War III.
Well, what I really remember is that MacArthur was really looked upon as a great hero for what he did in World War II. And then later on in the Korean War, there was disagreement with the president, and it led eventually to his being fired, as it were, because, as it was said, he wasn't loyal to the president. Now, there were people on both sides. There were many people that thought MacArthur was still a great man, that he should not have been fired, and so forth. And then there were others that felt if he couldn't listen to what the commander-in-chief said, then he should not have.
We had 6 boys in our family, and at that time we hadn't all been born, but there were 4 or 5 of us, and we all were in this one little small bedroom, and we always woke up in the morning and the radio was on, and we remember hearing that General MacArthur had been what amounted to, he'd been fired, he'd been relieved of command. And then we can remember just the public outcry and the outrage. You know, some thought it was a great thing to do, others thought it was a horrible idea. And probably some of those things made me become very, very interested in history and how things work, because I was trying to figure out why it was such a decorated war hero being relieved of command. And then you had some people say, well, the guy was a warmonger, you know, he wanted to go and invade and go all through Korea right into China, just, you know, just go. Many people were in favor of that. You know, others say, no, we've already been through that, and we don't need a guy like that.
The country, I think they have more favorable memories of MacArthur than unfavorable. But I think as a whole, the country thought that he should have been fired, and Truman was certainly within his rights to fire him.
To me, it was hard to see him being relieved at the time, but that's a decision that President Truman made, and I didn't agree with it then and don't agree with it now.
Tough.
Yeah.
Little fellow tough.
But in retrospect, you look back and MacArthur was probably right. We should have done that instead of sitting back and waiting the way we did. Everybody felt bad. He made tours around the country, whether it was a last goodbye. He addressed the joint session of the Congress and gave a very moving speech and he ended with saying, "Old soldiers never die, they just fade away."
Old soldiers never die, they just fade away.
Those soldiers never die, they just fade away.
Old soldiers never die, they just fade away.
Old soldiers never die, they just fade away.
But I still remember the refrain of one of the most popular barrack ballads of that day, which proclaimed most proudly that old soldiers never die, they just fade away. And like the old soldier of that ballad, I now close my military career and just fade away.
Most of us didn't have color TV, and we would go in any special program. They weren't on 24 hours a day like they are now. And we would visit people who had color TVs to go and watch.
We had TV in 51, our neighbors did. And I used to babysit on Saturday night, and I remember it was real fuzzy, because I lived in a very rural area, and so the closest station was Memphis, and that was 150 miles away, if you can imagine.
On January 1st, 1950, there were only 3 million television sets in America. But in that year, we bought another 7 million and made the big shift from radio to television.
And it's funny because I can remember our first TV. My dad worked in a supply company, and they wanted to get some of these out and let people look at them and stuff. But the console itself was a beautiful chest, and the screen was probably 6 or 8 inches. I mean, it was so incredibly small, but no one had anything like that. You know, there weren't many people with the TVs, and then all of a sudden, during that period in the early 50s, you know, I was on every house, there was an aerial on top of it, so you knew those people had a TV, because you had to have an aerial attached to your house.
When color TV came out, Papa's sister they had TV before we did, and we were over there one Thanksgiving, and color TV had come out, and of course it was the strangest thing, because people would call up the station and they would say, "I'm not getting this program in color on my TV." And they would say, "Well, did you buy a color TV set?" And they'd say, "Well, no, we just have our regular set." I said, "Well, you have to have a special set to receive color on your TV." That's how little people knew about it. And but we went to Bobby's sister's house, Aunt Janice. I don't know if you remember Aunt Janice and Uncle Paul. We went to their house, and color TV was the big thing that had come out. And what they had done, they had a sheet of like plastic, and they attached it to the screen like of their TV set, and it was like a greenish color. It was like a greenish color, and that gave them their color TV. Vivian Lee's character was Blanche, and she had been living, she might have been living on their old plantation. They were a family who had lost all of their money and had been very wealthy at one time, and she was a teacher. And she came to live with her sister, and found out, she met a friend of theirs, a man, and I think the man had fallen in love with her and wanted to marry her, and found out, just so sad, that she had been fired for having sexual relations with her students. And it was just, and so of course he couldn't swallow that.
That was a good movie, and it was filmed in New Orleans, and it was
Tennessee Williams wrote the play, and of course the trolleys in New Orleans, it was filmed in New Orleans, so they were able to use the trolleys, which was a boost for New Orleans for their trade and everything.
We obviously read and heard about this new actor that was just supposed to be the coolest guy in the world, Marlon Brando, and you know, that was kind of his coming out party with that movie.
And Marlon Brando was a huge big star. He was a method actor. And that was something new. That was a special school that they all went to. And everyone thought he was so wonderful. But he was so different from all the other actors who came before. I did not think he was that wonderful.
Hey, Stella! You put that howling down there and go to bed. Johnson, why am I doing down here? You shut up! You gotta get the law, and you beat on a woman and then call her back when she ain't gonna come. You're gonna have a baby. Listen, I hope they haul you in and turn a fire on you like a light down here. You stink. Hey, Stella!
Stella, huh? But he said Stella. His acting was tremendous. He changed, his method of acting was just tremendous. Everybody else copied him. They talk about James Dean, you know, copying James Dean, but James Dean copied Marlon Brando.
Was a classic, there was no doubt about it. I can remember it well because from a very young age I was always a Brooklyn Dodger fan. So that was like that. Ripped my heart out. It was Bobby Thompson hit a home run, bottom of the ninth inning, and they replayed it so many times and still replay it. Russ Hodges, I think was the guy that was doing the commentary, and he just kept screaming, "The Giants win the pennant, the Giants win the pennant, the Giants win the pennant." So for a Dodger, like I say, the Dodger fan, oh man, we just died with that. And it's funny how you remember things like that. Bobby Thompson was a batter. Ralph Branca was the pitcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And the headlines for that in many of the newspapers was "the shot heard around the world." That's what it was referred to. It was a home run that won the game at the bottom of the ninth inning.
Especially the announcer that was announcing it. He just completely got so excited and everything else. It was almost like if you ever seen the run back of Florida, mention Billy Cannon against Ole Miss, you know, and they play back that every Halloween back in '50. The announcer J.T. Politz got all excited and he just started screaming, you know, that he scored a touchdown. That's what this happened. I don't know who the announcer was, but it was just between it wasn't a World Series, it was just a playoffs, I think. And he hit that home run, and he was just talking generally, and then he said, wouldn't it be something if he would hit a home run? And then all of a sudden he hits the home run, and this guy just goes, he hit a home run, he hit a home run, and you know how his voice goes up real high, and he's really screaming at the top of his voice.
And I remember that vividly. They were arrested and tried and sentenced to death, and both were executed. And of course, that was one of the first times outside of, declared wartime that someone that I ever heard of was convicted of treason and sentenced to death.
And I think they were about the only ones who were really killed, executed because of the espionage that they committed during the war. But they were and I think they left 2 daughters who were there, but it was really unheard of that
it was the flimsiest evidence that they ever had. They got them on communism, and I think because of the Cold War and because of, I think the way people felt about communism and everything else in Russia, they were the evil empire and everything for us, that I think that's why they were so easily convicted.